we are absolutely hiring very smart folks that want to go into AI, that can learn a sales process, but also are going to go evangelize a new market. And that combination is really hard to find.
All right, welcome to Sound Bites. My name is Bill Bench. I'm an operating partner with Battery Ventures, and this is our fourth episode this season. And I'm super excited to have somebody that I've been analogous in my career with and then connected with years ago joining us. We have Ryan Meadows from Lovable. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
It's good to connect. I think you and I, like I said, shared some background. We both were living in Asia Pac, you with HubSpot, me with Marketo, and spent some time overseas, which is an interesting alignment that we started with. And then I think we really got connected about 4 or 5 years ago, right when I joined Battery through one of the Battery CEOs that you were helping advise and talk to. So it's great to come full circle to this today.
It does feel like full circle. Yeah, we had some good battles out there opening some new regions. Those were good years.
Mark Roberge and I talked about this the other day. He was here in Arizona doing an event with Stage 2. Stage 2 and Battery just did a co-investment together in a company, and he was hosting an event around his new book. And we talked about the joy, the competitiveness, but the joy of building the marketing automation space. And that, at the end of a trade show, we'd look over at each other and all of us are packing up our booths. And we'd be like, you want to go get a beer and just like trade tales? And it was so cool. It was this co-opetition thing of like, yeah, you guys beat us here, or we won this deal and we were really happy that we won it. And we just trade these stories, and like you trade just enough information, but not too much information. But those market automation battles were epic, and it was really fun to be part of building a category.
Yeah, it was really fun. There's just not a lot of people that have the same lived experiences. It's a small group, and so when you find those people, there's lots to talk about, and we've kept in touch after all those years.
Okay, so let's dive into your experience specifically with Lovable here. You're just coming, or you're full 6 months into the role there, but what's the backstory on how you got there? Because you're like a lot of traditional CROs that started your career in SaaS, being at HubSpot and then moving to Klaviyo, and now have leaned fully into the AI motion. So I'm sure there's some story there of how you made that transition.
Yeah, well, it actually came from me being a customer. And so I was really fortunate to be part of the amazing Klaviyo journey with Andrew there. He's built an incredible business. And I was there from 60 million to well over $1 billion ARR. And during that time, we had built a sales organization from scratch to, when I left, about 500 folks. And we had a great employee NPS. I mean, this was a humming sales organization, great culture. We'd score 88, 85, 90 on the employee NPS scores, but there was always one question, or at least in the last few years, that kept creeping up, which was, do you have the systems and tools to support your job? And it makes sense that we would score so poorly on that. When you grew that fast over 6 years, we were rolling out territories. We were rolling out, I think we had 25 different SaaS subscriptions, from enrichment tools to, signal tools to everything you can imagine. And we just started to sort of collapse under that weight of people not feeling like they actually had the tools to do their job. And we started to measure it. 80% of a CSM and an AE's time was spent on administrative tasks, not speaking to customers. And so it got to the point where the third year, you're standing at, up on stage at SCO, and this is the year we're going to solve your systems. And, people kind of look at you and say, yeah, okay, sure, Ryan, you said that the last 2 kickoffs, right? Is this really going to be the year? And then at the same time, you're seeing maybe in your personal life what, ChatGPT comes out and everyone has that moment. You start to see what these models are capable of. And you go, me cleaning up some stale stages and fields was not going to be enough. Like, there's this opportunity here to really rethink the way that go-to-market operates, so they could spend more time with customers, then I could build a more efficient organization. And we started doing all these POCs with all of the big companies, our tech stack that you could imagine, and we couldn't get there. And finally, I actually heard Yamini, CEO of HubSpot, mention Lovable. I was like, I got to give this a shot. And on one Saturday morning, I built a whole new front end to our CRM that was taking their CRM data, was taking an LLM and actually suggesting what a sales rep should do. And I started using it in deal reviews with my team. So we did an end of quarter deal review. And I remember that moment where we put 600 deals in it. And it told me the 2 deals to focus on that were set for Q3, but should be closed in Q2. And lo and behold, we dug into those with the reps. We pushed them. They said, no, Ryan, it's Q3 deal. It's a Q3 deal. And we said, no, we're going to run this play. And we ended up closing both of those deals that got us over the quarter. And so that was the big aha moment for me. And yeah, so my journey actually started as a customer, just trying to figure this out.
So as a user, that's a great way to certainly light the spark for wanting to go work in a company, is to actually like consume and use the software. You know, in that answer, Ryan, you brought up a couple things. You talked about the fast growth and like, you know, falling underneath the pump, so to speak, of that. It makes me think about today, the role of being a CRO. And yep. It's as much as some of these technologies are helping us, it's also very difficult. Like, you know, I think the question here is, how do you keep up, right? Like, you're leading all of the revenue at Lovable, which is hyper scaling. Every few weeks we see that an LLM has dropped something that's new that we all want to be able to use. We can find the time. Yep. And then meanwhile, you're, as you just called out, a user of your own product. I'm going to assume you're going to tell us what you're building in Lovable at Lovable. So I'm curious, how do you keep up, and do you see like a shift occurring with what the definition of the role of the revenue leader looks like now?
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot to keep up with, and it's compounded by the fact that, you know, we went from 0 to 400 million ARR in 16, 17 months here. And so we're also hitting these, you know, you and I were talking about being in Asia Pac at the same time. I've got a very tried and true playbook. When do you open a market? When do you add a new product? When do you push up market into new segments? And seeing this kind of rapid growth Lovable has made me reevaluate if any of those playbooks hold water at this new pace that is completely unprecedented. And it makes you think twice. And it sort of forces you to start figuring out, how can I operate 10 times faster than I have in the past? 40%, you know, 30% is no longer a great growth rate. How do we 40x this in a year? And so it really forces you to start to rethink, how would you operate if you wanted to open up 5 new markets at the same time? How would you operate if you wanted to hire at a you know, really massive scale, enable at that sort of scale? And if you work your way backwards, what has changed for me is a couple things. One is, I have to be as close as I ever have in my career to customers and product. So I am deeply in with our engineers and our product team to ensure that, because they can build at a pace that has just not been possible in the past. So are we building the right things? And we probably change our roadmap every 2 to 3 weeks. Like something comes up, something changes, and we need to be super flexible to that. And then the other piece of this is, we want every interaction, everything in our company to essentially hit our database and be transcribed. And that allows access to information that I've never had before. I don't set up forecast meetings and spend 10 hours a week in forecast. We don't do these deal reviews where we're reporting the news. I can get all of that information in 10 seconds right now. You know, on a customer call earlier today, I get all that information given to me in 10 seconds. So there's no more delay in all the information sharing. And I think that alone empowers us to just go a lot faster. So I just need access to everything so I can make fast decisions. And then I really think you have to throw out a lot of your playbook, because you can just see when folks come over from great SaaS companies, you have to sort of get them unshackled from what they thought were rate limiters of the past and start to realize that you can go a lot faster.
Ryan, I have a comment there and a reaction to your last answer, and then I have a follow-on question. The comment is, just yesterday, I was out at Arizona State University and I was lecturing for a class on creating value out of organizations. And I talked about those exact 3 growth levers you just talked about, which is, when do you enter a new geographic market? When do you add a product? And when do you, was it geographic, multi-product? And when do you change segments? Were the areas that I talked about. And I started the presentation by caveating that the case study we're going to talk through was about 10 years old, and that today the speed and the rate of how fast this is happening is epically fast. So throughout any of the timing assumptions I talk about, but let's just talk about the concepts of going up market, of going out of your primary market, and changing who your initial buyer was. So interesting reaction to what you just said there. But the follow-on question there is I'm talking with CROs left and right, and they're telling me similar things to what you just shared, about how they're getting access to data, how they're actioning data, and how they're driving their teams. Inside of Lovable, how you mentioned that, like, the old 10 hours in the forecast before you go create it doesn't happen anymore. How is that being created inside of Lovable? Is that something that happens at your level? Do you have RevOps? Is RevOps evolving to this idea of go-to-market engineering that we hear about? What's that look like for you?
Keep in mind that a big reason why I am so passionate about Lovable is because the answer is going to be a lot of this is built on Lovable. But maybe before I share that, the first decision I had, because we didn't have really go to market when I joined back in October, is how do we want to architect this for the future, and started to rethink some of the roles. And so RevOps and the amazing person that's running that for us very much came from a systems background. And I can remember, her head spinning when I said, "Look, you're going to build self-improving agents. We're not going to hire a BDR team. You're going to build that all with AI. We're not going to hire a massive, commercial team because we're going to drive a lot of that through the product, and then we're going to build everything on Lovable that the teams and the customers touch." And so, therefore, I actually led much more to a systems and engineering background for that leader than I did a traditional strategy and operations. And that was a very strategic decision for us. And then I supplement that with an enablement and strategy leader who, instead of focusing on more of the L&D side of enablement, is obsessing over, I'm going to feed the LLM all the menu options of what makes our go-to-market engagement process great. So we're going to feed it so that it can then tell our salespeople and our CSMs and our SAs what the best next step is. And if you don't like that next step, here's another 20 on the menu. And so it's just rethinking from the top, what kind of leaders do you want and what should they be focused on? And then now that we have that, we've just gotten to work. And so, if you look at my objectives, and since I joined, it's, figure out your ICP and your value prop and all these things. But right there with it was architect the systems that we're going to use to drive this in the future. And, the fun part for me is that we have a massive incentive to do all of that on Lovable. So everything from our pitch decks to that have pre-call research, all of our next steps, forecasting, hell, even our deal room that then could generate a quote. And if you accept that quote to send it to e-signature, I sign now all of our enterprise contracts through a Lovable built application. So we're really leaning in to put everything on Lovable.
That makes sense. The term vibe coding is out there, and it's certainly having a moment right now. But I think what you're talking about here is change management more than vibe coding. It sounds like I'm guessing that term vibe coding is going to go away and just simply, kind of on the fly coding or in the function coding. Something's going to take over it. Are you seeing the same thing? And how are you seeing that being adopted inside of organizations you sell to?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because there was a moment in December, I'd say last year, vibe coding had a moment, but it's still, you heard the term slop, AI slop quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then there's a variety of things that happen. Some of the frontier models getting better, some of the things that we did getting better. And towards the end of the year, you start to see that change. And we track this within our product. I can see, we have the benefit of seeing when people revert. They do something and they say, actually, no, that's not what I want. Let me go back. And when you look at that curve of reverts just going down and down and down, you say, wow, we're going to get to a place where this is as good or better than a human writing this code. And so, and I really think we've gotten there. And so this year, I've seen a major shift from teams using this to bring their ideas to life, which is still very valuable. Most teams still haven't even done that. That's just prototyping. That's where I was. I wish I had this system. I don't really know how to explain it. Let me show you. Great. But the shift this year, and we're seeing, major Fortune 500 companies get here as well, is they're actually now shipping things. And they're, imagine all of the software that could have been built by employees who are closest to your customers, but they could never get the IT team to care. They could never get the engineering team to care. Yet they never had either the taste or the capabilities to write the code themselves. That's just getting democratized faster than I think we thought. And it's pretty exciting what I see when I see people out there building things. So yeah, I think where it goes in the future, you still got to figure out where you want citizen development versus where you want central governance, and to make sure there's security and that you can audit things. But every company is figuring out that balance. And where that leaves us is I subscribe right now. I think it's about half a technology problem. There isn't really approachable AI solutions. And I think that's why we're having such great growth. But certainly at least half of it is a change management conversation. How do I collect ideas and run hackathons? How do I prove what should be worked on? Where do I set IT guardrails? These are all of the things that every customer has to figure out.
Yeah, I think so too. You and I traded some riffs on LinkedIn at the end of 2025 because I was being asked by a lot of portfolio company CROs for their sales kickoff. What are the trends you're seeing? What are the topics people are talking about? How are they implementing AI into it? And I made a suggestion that you picked up on, which I said, have your team go download Lovable and build something, right? Like, let's just go do it. And it was interesting because that post got a lot of very positive feedback. I also got some people trolling me a little bit. Like, if you invited me to a sales kickoff and asked me to code something, I wouldn't go. And I'm thinking to myself, like, hey man, like, don't be the SaaS guy living in the AI world. Like pick it up and make the leap. Like, you went from selling software to selling stuff in the cloud. Like, you to do that, you could probably do this. But yeah, the change management that's happening so fast. And I mean, even if I look back on my managing career, the time I've managed people, very early on like in the late 90s, I actually would think of going to internal IT to build me something. And then shortly after 2000, that idea just went away. I just bought what I needed to be able to run my business. And now we're seeing that, well, now I can actually think about, because like you said, I'm closest to my business. I'm closest to my customer. I can now think about what I want to build and I can go action it. And that's just a change, both the speed of how fast we can do it. Because like you said, the old IT process, okay, Bill, we'll come scope the project. We'll apply some engineers, we'll build it, and then we'll test it, and then we'll put it to production, right? And just the speed of how fast that like leaders like myself or like you, like a revenue leader, can go action that right now is totally breaking down walls. I imagine you just must have story after story like that inside of Lovable. It leads me to think, or to ask, when you go focus on selling, are you reacting to what people want to do inbound? Is it a mix of, we have a set of use cases that are just locked and loaded, that these are the ones that when we go inside of an organization, they just land well, we get success with it, and then they grow from there? How does that work inside of Lovable?
It's been, well, first of all, back when you posted that, I was giving out a lot of free Lovable because people did want to go build things. And they're not just messing around and building. People, enablement leaders were building role play exercises and all sorts of creative ways to get people to stop sitting and receiving a presentation and to actually go. And one of my favorite enablement leaders always says, "Don't practice on your customers." And so, how do you build an environment where you can practice before you get into it with a customer? But as for where we're going. I am surprised every day by what people are building. And I'll tell you, this is a tricky part about, what we have to figure out over here at Lovable, because when you give someone a blank canvas, which so many of these AI tools are, it's just your creativity that holds you back. And the reality is most humans still go for something pretty basic. And so you get common use cases like, I want to create a slide deck. Now I'll tell you, maybe that person that was hesitant to jump into the AI game, if they can create a slide deck and in one prompt, I can say, I'm meeting with Bill at Battery today, and change everything in this slide deck to be specific to Bill and Battery. Change the logo, change all the pre-call research, everything. And you watch Lovable do that in 1 minute of work, and you have a presentation that's ready to go. I think they're going to be excited. But in the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty basic use case. And so what we're working on is going department by department. HR leaders want beautiful org charts that show what people are actually doing. They want better how many folks don't like the performance review software that they're going through? They want, spiff generators. Finance professionals want data visualization. That's the top ask from there. Marketers want landing pages. Same thing. You and I know this better than anyone. They don't want to go to IT, wait 2 weeks for their CMS to spin up a landing page. So it's quite diverse. And then you have folks that are totally pushing the boundaries with, I had someone that had 83,000 employees and they replaced their internal communications tool with completely built on Lovable. Pretty shocking. And so what we try to do is actually just to elicit that creativity, go in and say, you're probably not collecting all of your employee ideas in the best way that you can. How do we build that culture? And that's through it's exactly your recommendation. It's through some version of a hackathon, is through sharing ideas, get the ideas from all of your employees, and then bring those back and centralize them into things that you're actually going to build. So yeah, it's interesting. We try to stimulate that with some idea sharing, but at the end of the day, we actually really want them to change their culture, to be leaning into that more than us just telling them what they can build.
That makes sense. I saw, just from the outside looking into Lovable and seeing the growth, and you just mentioned the 0 to 400 and just such a rapid pace. What are your key growth drivers as you look out the windshield, Ryan? Like we talked about, that the old playbook of go up market, go out of your primary market, add more products. I'm seeing you do some of those things. I see your posts on LinkedIn that you're hiring more reps in the US. I see that you just opened up London, that you weren't putting boots on the ground. Now you are. Also, from what I see from the outside, it seems like enterprise adoption, like you just mentioned, that 83,000 person company, enterprise adoption seems to be a big initiative for Lovable. What are the things that you're using right now to drive the growth now that you've gotten in the seat and been there for a little bit of time?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So, if you go way back to when our founder Anton was sort of had this idea that these AI code gen tools were going to exist, and actually built one of the first ones of them, put it on GitHub, and expected a bunch of engineers to pick it up. And what was sort of shocking in the big aha moment was it ended up being mostly non-technical folks that were picking this up. And so when we launched that, very, very quickly went to 8 million users and now, 15 million users. And so, people are out there swiping their credit card, and we have an amazing engineering team in Stockholm that built this incredible product that allows you to build. But as I started to look at the business, and you realize, wow, 30, 40, 50% of those people work for an enterprise company, but they're ahead of their company. Just like you're probably out there tinkering and trying to educate yourself as everyone else is. They're doing that. And you start to realize, wow, they're trying to build something for their company and they're actually outpacing their company. And so we've been flooded with tens of thousands of companies coming to us, saying, it's a head of product, it's a CRO. So I know people are using you. What do I do about this? How do I bring this together? Then we're turning on our product-led sales motion, which is this beautiful motion of 15 million people are touching and feeling the product. We can use some waterfall enrichment. We can identify that they work for businesses. We can prioritize those and build a great experience to build pipeline. And then we try to take those levers. And yes, one is we have interest from the biggest companies in the world, but also, from SMB and from mid-market. And so I'm deploying humans only on the biggest, and we're building, self-improving AI agents, and we're building a light touch support model where they actually are a bit educated on go-to-market and know when to help a customer, not just with the product, but to actually close them, or when to send that over to a sales team. And so we're trying to cover all of those segments. And then we're doing that internationally. So we just announced London as a core hub for us. We recently announced San Francisco, so we'll be opening up San Francisco soon. And we can't hire fast enough. We can't hire fast enough across the board. Partnership, sales, customer success, forward deployed engineers, operations. Really, we'll more than triple headcount this year. So we're just trying to hire as fast as we can.
Which is really assuring for a lot of reasons. Number one, I think people looking at Lovable probably realize the PLG motion, but the fact that you're there Ryan, in the fact that you just said what you did, which is we just opened up San Francisco, we just opened London, we can't hire fast enough. It really emphasizes the importance of a selling motion in an AI company in the AI age. Any more thoughts you can share there? Because I think a lot of people, we hear about the SaaS apocalypse, we see jobs going away, and you are in the center of the tornado.
Yeah.
Lovable is in the center of the tornado, and look at the growth that you're doing from the traditional method of hiring salespeople that are going to lead sales cycles. So any more thoughts you can give around that?
Well, it maybe in two forms. One is one of the things that's happened with Lovable is we are supporting entrepreneurship in a major way. So imagine, Bill, you've always had an idea that you wanted to start, but you would have had to pay a lot of money to find a technical person to build that for you, or you would have had to go learn it yourself. And so that idea maybe sat in the back of your head and you were never able to build it. And we're
Right.
seeing millions of people that have now crossed that chasm and they can actually build. And so I have quite just from firsthand experience here at Lovable, quite an optimist view that there's going to be a lot more entrepreneurship and there's going to be a lot more people out there building things and a lot more small businesses because of what's happening. So one, I'm left excited about that. I think within an enterprise, which we are becoming, the roles are shifting, right? And so, admittedly, and I'm very proud of starting my career in business development. That has not been one of the first things we've hired. But on the flip side, we are absolutely hiring very smart folks that want to go into AI, that want to be in go-to-market and work with customers, that can learn a sales process, but also are going to go evangelize a new market. And that combination is really hard to find. And it's a massive opportunity for young people that they want to be in an office. They want to be, we are fully in office. It is an intense culture. There's a massive opportunity for people to take advantage of that. So I do think the roles are shifting. We expect a bit more technical knowledge. We certainly have more of an in-office presence. We expect more evangelism than just sort of hanging back and doing typical discovery, but those things create opportunities. So, and then, we can't hire enough. So I think it's there for the taking, but it's certainly a adjusted playbook than what I've been doing the last, 18 years.
That might be my favorite part of the podcast here so far. I love everything you said, but you're recognizing the change, along those lines. And I'm really wondering this for myself because I don't want to be the SaaS guy living in the AI world. Ryan, for a person that spent a lot of your career in traditional SaaS, HubSpot and Klaviyo being kind of the two big anchors of where you've anchored your career,
Yep.
and then comparing it to what you're seeing here in your first 6 months of an AI native company, anything that you like top of mind observations that you've noticed?
I think it comes in a few forms. One is also just stage, right? We're a early stage, fast growing. And so we have expectations for folks to participate as part of that team in many, many ways. Meaning, one of our great salespeople actually built our first legal framework agent that they knew that Ryan wasn't going to approve that deal with those terms. It learned based on all of Ryan's feedback, and they built the first agent so that they could get a lot more knowledgeable before they send it to me. So, no, you can't have opt-out for convenience. Ryan's never going to approve that, right? And these sorts of things. And so, you just get people that are really in tune with what we're trying to solve, give them the tools to build, and seeing that come to life has been pretty special. And I don't know if that's so much of a, specific company to specific company issue. I think that's more about the traits of who you're hiring and the expectations. This is not a, if you want to be part of one of these 20 AI companies changing the world, it's not a come in and just do your job. There's a lot of things to be done. And I think that those people are shining. But with that said, I think the other side of it is changing really rapidly. And I was very proud, at HubSpot, Klaviyo, two things we did really well there is we built an amazing playbook and we had amazing enablement and everyone was on the same page. I don't have that luxury. and things are moving too quickly to hire folks that can just run the playbook. And so we're looking much more heavily at adaptability, their slope to learn, to adjust, and then to evangelize, because you could have a better widget. In many ways, Klaviyo was a better widget, was the early growth. This isn't a better widget. There is no incumbent. There is no playbook. And so, do you have an ability to evangelize as well? So I think, look, we're still primarily hiring from SaaS. So I think there's amazing people in these companies, but they need to exhibit these traits that show us that it's going to adapt and it's going to work in this new environment.
Yeah, I think your adaptability and evangelical mindset is right there. Like I say this all the time. I started my career right as the internet was entering the business world, and went through that massive shift, and that, included the creation of the .com. And then I call this out, the shift from selling software like CDs and tapes over to the cloud. And then these things, right? Like the shift of these going from being just a kind of a novel, another communication device, to being something that we do work and commerce on. And now I'm watching this shift from, kind of the cloud to the AI move. And I think that curiosity that you talked about there, that ability to come in, want to evangelize something, the curiosity being adaptable and then wanting to evangelize something. And I know, because having lived it, you've lived it at HubSpot, I've lived it in my past, that outside looking in, everything at Lovable looks up and to the right. But when you're inside the tornado, which we just talked about, it's not so much. It's not so easy. And you just talked about like building things to make processes run easier, to share tribal knowledge. Like you said, the legal app, like so that a rep that gets hired in London doesn't have to get that fortunate, or doesn't have to ask the exact right question to the exact right person to be able to get the exact right answer of what's going to get approved versus what won't. Yeah. So it makes me always ask the inverse of that. Those are things that are helping you. They're helping you be more productive. You talked about your RevOps, but from the outside looking in, it looks up and to the right, looks easy. It never is. Yep. What isn't working as well, or what broke for you guys? Like we talked about collapsing under the weight of your growth previously. What's been a challenge for you?
I think the biggest challenge is that that democratization that we're bringing out to our customers, the ability to build software. Well, that exists. That's available for everyone. And so the competition, the speed of change in the market, it's only going to increase when the cost and speed to build software goes to zero. It's going to zero. And so if everyone has those capabilities, how do you stay ahead of the market? That's what ultimately keeps us up at night, which is, sure, you can celebrate adding 100 million and this and that and all of these milestones. But what I'm really focused on is how do we continue to be more and more load bearing for customers? And how do we get to all of the folks that actually haven't even jumped in the game yet and show them that this is capable? I was with a very large energy provider in Texas this week, and they are really thinking about how they overhaul their business with AI, but they're not in the bubble of already using all of these sorts of tools. And so, these are the things that keep me up, is about, are we going fast enough, and are we getting customers to build the right things and enough with us? And that's what we were talking about earlier, that there's not a playbook that I don't think anyone can take from the last 20 years that perfectly fits that. And so it gives us a chance to work from first principles of, what more can we do and how much faster we can go. So that's sort of how I look at the market. And then the other piece is, we were talking about talent, and, we are rethinking talent in a bunch of different ways. We're hiring really fast. But we have to, we could run it, even though they have the tools to all be much more productive. If you don't build the right system, you don't bring in the right people, that can also actually just end up slowing you down. And so thinking a lot about keeping that bar incredibly high, consistent, and then how do we also use our tools and AI to enable, intelligence sharing and knowledge sharing, reduce layers in the business. I think the hierarchies of the past are pretty much out the window. And so how do we make sure that we scale uh, that appropriately? Because I could add 200 folks and go to market this year, and we could actually do less, or engineers for the same matter. And so those are a couple of things that really keep me up that we're working on.
Yeah, I think that's probably shared with a lot of companies. When I speak with our portfolio companies, they're all thinking about the same thing, call it the innovator's dilemma or just calling it innovation. But how do they keep driving and stay differentiated? And then secondly, the people element of it is, despite what some of maybe the doomsday predictions are, a lot of this comes down to the people operating the levers and the gears themselves. So I think that's true, which is a great place for me to segue to a forward-looking question. A great place for us to wrap this up, Ryan, is if you look out the windshield to a year from now, April of 2027, and you look at what the world looks like, something germane to you and I, the revenue world. Do you see the typical seller, the typical account executive? Do you see them using more apps, less apps? Do you see that it's just a mix of apps that are packaged as well as things that they or their organization has built? What do you think it looks like out there a year from now?
I'm sure you and I have built many 3-year plans. I'll tell you, since I joined Lovable, I try not to even predict 1 year out, because all of my 1 year predictions are pretty much happening in 2 or 3 months every time I say it out loud. So I try not to play this game too much. If you ask me what's going to happen next quarter, I think I'd have a really good answer for you. 6 months, it gets shaky. 1 year, I'm surely going to be wrong, but we can take a stab at it. And I think within the go-to-market world, I'm not too concerned of whether it's an app or whatever you as a UI layer might sort of obfuscate, and you're using agents to go interact with apps. Not too worried about whether we call it an app or not, but I think what's going to continue to persist and go to market and work, and that is people delivering a really compelling experience. And so where does that start to fall down? Everyone's been saying this for 20 years, your buyer's coming to you more educated. Well, they are certainly more educated at this point. So how are you going to help them? And if you look at your job as a chauffeur to just be a friendly face of the company that's going to kind of move them along and give them a generic experience, I think you're in big trouble. I think you're in really, really big trouble. And so how do you keep pace with a buyer that has all of this available to them? And I think you need to work on your tooling so that you can stay one step ahead, and or your creativity. And so when I'm out in the market looking for folks, creativity is top of the list of what I'm looking for. Because are you going to creatively deliver a great experience for each customer? And I trust then that they're actually going to be able to deploy a great experience. And you said it earlier, most of this is change management. So who are the people that you're actually going to trust to take you on that journey? And if you're just doing a classic BANT or a classic MedPick, and you're just staying in discovery phase, and you're not actually getting them to change management and doing something that's really meaningful, I just think that you're going to be in big trouble. And then there's the basics of I'm certainly spoiled. When we show up with a customer, their hands are on the software, the design is on point or uses their design, and we're on site, we're in person. That has certainly changed a lot in the last few years. In person is back. I think it makes all the difference. And that is a major difference versus a company that frankly is just boring to interact with. So I just think we're going to continue to see that shift. And I think a lot of people are going to get left behind because they haven't leaned into it.
I have that same worry. Ryan, this is so impactful. I can't wait to wrap this session up, go get it into editing and punch it out fast. And it's exactly because of what you said is about your predictions, maybe a quarter out, you can have some accuracy, 6 months, declining. But I love getting these out because a lot of the questions I asked you are the questions I'm being asked. And I'm just trying to go to leaders like yourself and absorb as much as I can and learn these ideas so I can share with our portfolio companies, because they're looking for the answers too. And let's go back where we started. We talked about playbooks or recipes. it's a whole new set of them that are being crafted right now. And I'm super excited. I'm super enthused to be in the middle of this right now. I gotta say, like, I've been out of school for 33 years. And I can't remember a time I was more excited just about what's happening on the innovation front right now. So this was, like I said, really impactful for you to be able to come and share. So thank you so much for joining me on Soundbites and doing this with me.
Yeah, thank you. 33 years, but who's counting? And maybe as people are thinking about that, Bill, there's a fear that if you step out of, I'm sure everyone's calendar is packed, and there's a fear if you stop doing those things, somehow things are going to slow down. And it's pretty amazing if you just go away for a week, that the world keeps moving on. And so maybe folks should spend a little bit more of their time actually stepping out and evaluating from first principles. What would I change? What would I build? How do I increase my knowledge on these topics? And from my experience, the world will be okay if you step away for a few hours every week and go figure these things out. And then you're going to end up bringing a lot more value back to your company for doing that. And so, it's always great to riff with you a little bit. It's good to see you.
Great closing advice for founders and for executives out there, because I know we are all, like you said, so busy. Our calendars are packed. And when I talk to people about if they're experimenting with things like Lovable or just AI, and I ask the question of if they say no, they're not, it's, like, I'm sure there's some trepidation, but it's mostly time. And so I think your suggestion there of take a few hours out of your week to be able just to go get some clear time, some clear air, and maybe experiment with some of these tools that are out there are going to be the thing that helps advance them.
Love it.